All right, let's do this. Welcome into the Fryer. I'm your host, Josh Fry, managing editor over at purpleptsd.com, where you can find all sorts of Minnesota Vikings news. Today, though, we're not talking about the Minnesota Vikings in this first episode of Into the Fryer. We've got a couple things to go over. First off, I'm going to give you my Super Bowl pick for the Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. That'll happen over the weekend. And then I have two special guests. Two close friends of mine, Tyler Straub and Gwen McCaw, are going to join me, and we are going to talk NBA All-Star teams. Obviously, the teams have officially been announced by the time that this is coming out, but we recorded prior to the reserves being announced. We already knew the starting lineups, but we did not know the reserves. So yeah, just know that going in. I don't think it'll affect it too much. Another thing, we also didn't know about the Kyrie Irving trade request. Again, don't think that's a huge deal going into this podcast, but just know we didn't know the official All-Star reserves, and we didn't know the Kyrie Irving trade request. But yeah, let's hop into the Fryer. All right, let's talk Super Bowl. Chiefs, Eagles. What better time to start a podcast than at the end of an NFL season? Am I right? Yeah, that's just how that worked. But anyways, let's talk about the game. I think first and foremost, this is one of the few times, or at least one of the few times in recent memory, where we can look at a Super Bowl matchup and truly say that these are the two best teams in the NFL that came out here and they earned spots in this game. And there's really no disputing that. I know going into the year, the Bills were everybody's darling pick to make it here and probably win the game. They were definitely mine too. But it became pretty clear as the season wore on that the Chiefs and Eagles are just, they're the cream of the crop in the league right now. I think Philly, if you look back, even as far as like week 2, their Monday Night Football win over the Vikings, the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes is just incredible, and their defense is no joke either. And as Buffalo's season wore on, they continued to have problems in the running game. Josh Allen had some funky turnovers down the stretch of the year that we just haven't been accustomed to seeing over the past few seasons from him. And yeah, that's how we end up in a situation in February where Chiefs and Eagles are meeting up, and it's gonna be one hell of a game, man. Patrick Mahomes, his high ankle sprain obviously is the big question going into this one. But at the end of the day, his legs are the reason that the Chiefs won the AFC Championship game. Say what you will about Joseph Ossai and his penalty. I'm not going to blame the kid too much for it, but obviously that's a call that they're going to make 10 times out of 10. And it helped the Chiefs come out and win this game because Patrick Mahomes was willing to put some pressure on his ankle and go get those yards when he needed to. And that's just the thing. Like, even if Patrick Mahomes is only 75-80% going into this game, it's probably not going to look like it. It's probably going to look like he's Patrick Mahomes because he's just going to go do what he does because he's just that great. And on the other side, Jalen Hurts has shown some significant improvements as a passer over the course of the season. I will say the Eagles are favored in this one by 1.5 points. If you look at a lot of the lines right now, I'm a little surprised by that, given how Hurts looked in the NFC Championship game. And granted, he didn't have to be great in order for the Eagles to win that one. So maybe I'm overreacting a little bit just because San Francisco, their QB situation put them out of that game right away with Brock Purdy and his torn UCL. And then they just had pretty much 2 plays that they could run the entire game, screen passes, and then just running up the middle. I'm a little surprised, first off, that Kyle Shanahan let the offense devolve the way that he did, because all season it's just been he's a mastermind on the offensive line. Look what he's doing with Mr. Irrelevant at quarterback. And then we get into the NFC Championship game, win or go home, and that's the offense that you run out. Granted, again, their quarterback situation was the absolute worst that you could be put in, but I'm a little surprised that they went down like that. But anyway, we're not talking about the 49ers. We're talking about the Eagles. San Francisco's pass rush, despite their quarterback situation, they got to Jalen Hurts quite a bit in that game. It's not going to show up on the box score, but he did face some pressure. And in terms of his throws, it was reminiscent of that wild card game last year against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where some of his throws were it just seemed like they were erratic, and he was just a second too slow on some of them, and he's throwing behind receivers and just entirely missing players at times. And I think that's going to be a problem in this one as well, in the Super Bowl, because this this Chiefs pass rush is no joke, man. I mean, looking at through the regular season, they were first in total pressures. They were second in sacks behind only the 49ers. They were fifth in pressure rate. Like, this is a team that has a knack for getting to opposing quarterbacks. And I think that Jalen Hurts is going to have a little bit of trouble with that one too. Not sure it'll cost them the game entirely because, again, Philly's defense is just as good as Kansas City's, if not better. They've got studs all over the defensive front, and their secondary is just awesome as well. So there's a chance that it's not going to matter how Jalen Hurts plays in this one just because of their defense. But if it's down to fourth quarter, it's a 3-point game either way, and one of these teams needs to get a touchdown to win. I'm leaning Patrick Mahomes. I trust that guy more than anybody in the NFL. When it matters, he's going to get the job done. Obviously, they came up just short last year against Joe Burrow in the AFC Championship game, but I'm going to trust this guy until he doesn't do it anymore, because last week people were saying that he's not going to do it because of his ankle, and look what he did. He went out, played incredible, and they won because he was willing to run the ball in a situation where we weren't sure going into that week he was going to be able to run the ball. So yeah, all that to say, I'm going Chiefs, especially if they're going to be 1.5-point underdogs. I'm taking Patrick Mahomes in that situation all day long. So yeah, do with that information what you will. But yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl this year. All right. Joining me in the fryer now are two very special guests. Actually, former co-hosts of mine on a podcast that we did, almost 4 years ago now. Mid-range jumper, back to our old college days where we did nothing but annoy our friends talking about basketball. It's pretty much 24/7. Tyler Straub and Gwen McCaw, welcome into the fryer.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
So, keeping it on theme with the old mid-range jumper crew, we are going to go over the NBA All-Star rosters. By the time this comes out, the reserves will have already been announced, but we're recording this on February 1st because that's just the best time that we had to meet up to do this. But yeah, I guess I'll start things off with just a couple things that I noticed while I was creating my list. First and foremost, if I was a kid getting into basketball just this season, like, I don't know, when I started watching basketball, I was like 10 years old, so like fourth grade or something. The only players I really knew were like LeBron, Shaq, Kobe, Michael Jordan. And everybody made a huge deal about Michael Jordan averaging 30 points per game for his entire career. If I was getting into basketball now, that would make absolutely no sense to me because 30 points a game is nothing anymore. There's like 7 dudes as we're recording this averaging 30 points a game. And it's just crazy. The stats are like nothing we've ever seen before. And it's just ridiculous. So yeah, that's just an interesting tidpoint, I guess. And then the other thing that I have is I have a proposal for how we can fix the all-star lineups. So for the starters, obviously there's the guards and the front courts, 2 guards, 3 front courts. Backcourt the reserves is the same, except there are also the 2 wild cards. So I'm proposing that we keep it sort of like the regular team structure with 1 guard, 1 front court, just so you know, the purists of basketball can have their typical center guy, their point guard, the best guard and best front court player in the league are definitely going to get in. But then why not just throw 3 wild cards in there? And then we can fix some problem that I'm sure we're going to run into tonight as we're talking about this, especially in some of the Eastern Conference and Western Conference front courts there's multiple guys that definitely deserve a spot. So why not just do 1 guard, 1 front court, and then 3 wild cards? Your guys' thoughts. I'll toss it over to you.
Yeah, well, first of all, happy to be here. I'm McCaw. I am currently, I suppose, just a professor's assistant and a grad student at University of Michigan studying history of Asia primarily, and I'm a former college athlete and former basketball podcast co-host. As far as your comment on changing the potential starting lineups for all-star games, I imagine you just want to put Giannis on your team. You can't if you don't do this. So I feel like on that principle alone, we shouldn't do that.
Okay.
But in actuality, I think a ball's existence would be a lot better for this. I think it better reflects a certain positionless part of the game. And I think that if like the mid ground is what you're saying, is having like one tiny guy, one big guy, and then everyone else kind of fill in the gaps. I think that's the best way to approach it, just to I don't know, just create a semblance of how actual basketball functions and make the All-Star game about just having the most exciting, fun players and not necessarily like you're not making an actual lineup here. It's an entertainment product, especially the All-Star game for the All NBA.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. There's always going to be like the old heads, I guess you could say, that are going to be like, yeah, we need to toss in a center in there for sure, just because that's how we used to do it in the 80s. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that this is supposed to be about just creating a basketball team. It's supposed to be about an entertaining product. We're going to watch some of the best players in the entire league play a game, and we want to make it entertaining, and we want to get everybody that's really good on the court at the same time. So I think there's a lot of merit to what you're saying. Tyler, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah. Well, first I'll introduce
Oh, good.
myself.
Yeah, do that.
My name is Tyler Straub. I guess I was like at one point a guest host of the mid-range jumper, and then
Oh,
eventually
don't be so modest.
eventually I just started showing up every week, and they're like, "All right, well, we'll keep you on." So, yeah, but similar to Gwen, we all ran cross country and track and field together, and I don't know. I'm just doing my everyday life as a software engineer who watches and enjoys and consumes a lot of basketball media. Um, anyways, I think Gwen put it well. The All-Star game really, at the end of the day, is, an entertainment product, and I think my teams won't really change anyways, because I think the way it worked out is that the wild card spots offer me enough flexibility. But yeah, I do think that reflects it better, and I think it's a good idea. So I'm down for whatever.
Cool. Glad we all are on the same page then. I guess might as well just get into it, huh? I'll lead us off. We're gonna start with the Western Conference, and I think we're gonna go over starting lineups first. We're gonna do guards and then forwards. Before we get into it, the starters are already announced. LeBron's the captain. Steph and Luka are the guards, and the other two front courts are Jokic and Zion. But I think we're gonna have some differences. Gwen's already giving me a thumbs down, so I'm excited to hear what she has to say about this. But I'll get us started with just my two guards. I went Luka because I mean, what can you say about Luka that hasn't already been said? He's one of the best players in the league. He's if you need a bucket any time of the game, he's going to be able to do it for you. Mavs are above 500 because he's on the team, and that's about it. So
Yeah, that offense is atrocious around him.
if he's not on the court, they go nowhere. So Luka's my first guard, and then my other one, he is not a starter right now, and I was a little bit shocked about that. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in OKC. I think that OKC team, we expected them to be terrible. And right now they are hovering. I think they're in the 11 seed as we're recording this, but it's the Western Conference, and everything is tight in the Western Conference, and they're only 2 games out from the 5 seed behind the Golden State Warriors. And a lot of that has to do with Shea. He's averaging, I think, 31, 5, and 6 right now as we're recording, and he's been everything for them. No Chet Holmgren. We didn't expect this team to be anything outside of a lottery team, and they're basically fighting for a playoff spot right now, and they have a very convincing argument for being a playoff team because Shea's been set good for them. So that's me. I'll toss it over to you guys. Tyler, why don't you get us going?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll start with the obvious. Obviously, I have Luka as well.
Okay.
You can make an argument that he is or has been, one of the best players in the league pretty easily. He's averaging a gaudy. How do you say it? Gaudy? I'm not sure.
Gaudy.
I think it's Gaudy.
It
I
is
think it's
gaudy.
Gaudy.
A
Yeah.
gaudy 34, 9, and 9. I mean, those are like,
Pretty
pretty
good.
absurd numbers, to say the least. I know there's gonna be no contention with that pick. I actually went with Steph Curry as my second guard. I find it really interesting that you picked Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because, well, I'll get more into this a little later when I talk about my reserves, but there are 3 guards in the West right now who have pretty similar numbers in terms of scoring, assists, and efficiency. And it's interesting because it kind of depends on which you value more. I'll just say the three guards. It's Curry, Shea, and Damian Lillard. They all roughly around that 30 point per game range. All have pretty good like low to mid 60 true shooting percentage because I'm a nerd and that's what I use.
There you go.
And yeah, and their teams, surprisingly are all very, very close to each other. Obviously the Warriors are the all the way up at the 5 seed, but the Blazers and the Thunder, who sit 11 and 12, are a whopping 2 games back right now. So pretty negligible difference. So my reason for picking Curry is when it's that close, in terms of, they're having very similar seasons, their teams are performing similarly, and like I mentioned before the podcast, and I'll mention that later as well, I value record a lot because that's how All-Stars traditionally have been valued. It kind of just goes down to the eye test and legacy. And I mean, truthfully, no matter how the season's going, no one's going to say Dame and Shea are better players than Steph Curry. So I went with Steph, sticking to the mass opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. I think what I leaned with Shea more was just, honestly, it was games played more than anything else, because Shea played 46 and Steph's played 35 at this point. Obviously, there's a lot of guys that have missed games, but if a guy's played that many games, I feel like I got to reward him, especially like you said, when the record is that negligible. So that's kind of why I went with Shea. But let's go to Gwen now. I think we got some big analysis from Gwen coming up here.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, so I think there's two big distinctions. I think from an offensive standpoint, like Tyler was saying, I think that those 3 guards are very comparable. I think that the 2 things that make Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, my pick for the All-Star starter, stand out are, first of all, minutes. You look at it from like a games played perspective, but also from a minutes perspective. He's played about 400 minutes more than Steph and about 300 minutes more than Dame, that's a pretty massive margin. Minutes is going to actually be a big deciding factor for me throughout this, because I think you have played. There's a certain body of work you have to have done. And I think that when you watch Oklahoma City, one of their defense still isn't great as a team, but one of the larger parts of their progress there has been Shea's ability to handle smaller wings, larger guards to an extent, and be able to handle as a point of contact defender. And I think that compared to Steph's fine at that for his size and scale. Dame's obviously going to be a bit of a minus, works hard, but he's doing other stuff. His value comes elsewhere. But I think Shea's physical traits and have always lent himself to possibly be a better defender. And I think as his offensive game is developed, you also see the intricacies in his defensive game, like how he can handle switch screens is a lot better. He's a lot cleaner, and he communicates a lot better with the lineup. So yeah, I'd repeat everything that you already said about the offensive performance statistics. I would just toss it. I think with defensive minutes, I would say Shea deserves that spot. Although small city bias, he's never going to get it. Like, as long as a fan votes a thing, he's never going to make that spot, as long as he's kicking.
Right.
Yeah, no. I will say, yeah, I think, as I just said, they're so similar guards that, yeah, Shea is obviously the best defender of the 3, and defense overlooked always. But yeah, I do think that's a very fair point. And honestly, I wouldn't be mad with any of those picks.
Cool. And I'm going to toss in a disclaimer now that I've been watching the NBA for about a grand total of 2 weeks now this season, because I've been doing nothing but NFL for the past 5 months. So I'm relying on Gwen and Tyler a lot more for some astute analysis for this episode. Hopefully that will be less the case moving forward. But for now, pay attention to them more than you pay attention to me. Obviously, as the host, that's probably a bad thing to say, but I'm just trying to be honest here. So
I don't understand, in your job, you don't have time set aside for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander defensive analysis. You don't watch Thunder games to analyze their scheme. I don't understand.
I know.
Bad host.
Bad sports fan. I'm sorry. No, but yeah. With that in mind, let's move over to the front court. For me, I know, Gwen, you had some trouble with this one. You mentioned it in our group chat a lot. So I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say about this. But for me, I went with LeBron James as my first front court, just because it's LeBron. He's the captain for a reason, and he's been great. But my other 2, I went Nikola Jokic, obviously from Denver.
Good. I'm happy you got over your hatred on the team.
My hatred.
Your hatred. Your disgust.
Yeah, least favorite player in the NBA, Nikola Jokic. Remember that. No. And then my final one, I'm less certain about, but I ended up landing with Domantas Sabonis for the last front court spot because that Kings team has been one of the biggest surprises in the entire league. And I think Sabonis, with everything he does between scoring, playmaking, his defense, he's very good. And there's 3 seed in the West right now. So with that, all that in mind, I thought he deserved the nod. So those are my 3. I'm going to go to Tyler again because I really want to save Gwen's analysis to close us off here on the front
That's so
court.
disappointing.
So yeah, obviously I have Jokic.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't watch basketball and is dumb. I also have LeBron. He had a slow start, as we know, and the Lakers have been kind of mid, but they managed to climb their way back to, well, they were below mid and they climbed their way back to mid. So good for him. And it's pretty much all been LeBron. He's averaging some pretty nutty numbers this year. So easy pick. My third pick, I also went with Domantas Sabonis. And my main argument was the games played thing as well. It's, when you're comparing guys like Shea to Steph and Dame, it's about an 8 to 10 game difference, which over 50 games, which is roughly where we're at right now, is obviously noticeable, but not huge. But with Sabonis versus, like the other contenders for the star spot, which would be Anthony Davis and Zion Williamson, in my mind, I guess you could also make an argument for Lauri Markkanen, but
Yeah, my guy.
sorry, I didn't mean to hate on him, but Utah, I forget. But we're talking about Anthony Davis, who's played 28 games, and Zion, who's played, I believe, 29 games, and may not even be healthy for in time for the game, if we're being honest. I don't know if we should not reward him with a spot because of that, but to me, that's a pretty severe gap in games. We're talking 20 plus games in 50 games through the season. And I don't know, like Josh said, Kings have been an amazing surprise. Sabonis has proven that the Halliburton trade was actually the Halliburton and Sabonis trade. And yeah, I'm really impressed with him. And I think he's deserving of the starting spot because of the time played.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I think that for what it's worth too, I think that there's part of what made this hard from the Western Conference side is there's four players who don't really fit my like smell test, my like cut. I've had this same cut
They
system
smell
for when I've
bad?
been doing these. I always think that it's 1,000 minutes. I think if you can't 1,000 minutes, at least when I'm doing these picks, whenever that happens to be, which is usually close to the All-Star break. I just don't feel like that's enough value you've contributed. And this was the season where I struggled with that the most because there's just so many guys. Like you have Anthony Davis, you have Zion, you have Jaren Jackson Jr., who is maybe a fringe candidate, but that's more because of his fouls for him. On the guard side, Desmond Bain, guys who I think could at least be something you could think about here, but I also think consider because of minutes. I had Jokic, everyone does. It's an easy pick. I had Domantas Sabonis. To me, those were actually my 2 locks going into this. I was like, I know they're going to make it. I didn't really question much about Sabonis. I think that his status as like a hub of that offense from the post and from the elbows is so important. The fact that he's jumped up to I think it's about 7.5 assists a game.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And his turnovers are higher, not that much higher. They're only at 3, and that's impressive. I don't know. It's a huge part of why the offense functions with some sketchy shooting at times. For me, it came down to actually LeBron and Lauri Markkanen for my last spot. Because if you break it down, like from a scoring perspective, from a shooting perspective, this has obviously been an incredible year for Lauri Markkanen. And he's made this jump from like serviceable starter or draft, maybe you could think of like a draft bust, up to like the focal point of a team that's at least okay on offense. They're tolerable. They're not fun to watch, but they do what they're doing. And I ended up not going with Lauri Markkanen, and I went with LeBron James my starter too. For A, it's LeBron James. Like at a certain point, what are we doing? Like this episode, what are we doing? He's
Right.
the best player, and he's a better player than Lauri Markkanen. People are going to look back on it in 5 years if you didn't pick him. What were we thinking? And also from like playmaking standpoint, like LeBron's playmaking is still so tremendously valuable, and Lauri Markkanen, no discredit to the guy, that's not what his game is yet. And I think that, to me, what puts LeBron up there, even though the team is pretty terrible, and I tend to penalize him a lot for that, is that playmaking element. And yeah, but that puts him in for me. So I think LeBron's had a sneaky not sneaky, not great, because the team hasn't been good. I don't feel like he's as good a year as the statistics would suggest. I also think this has been a weird year for stat inflation.
Oh yeah.
You already mentioned that at the head of the show, but I feel like LeBron's case is like, I've watched a lot of Lakers games, and I get it, but I don't really feel like he's doing that much as the stats would show. Just because everybody's just doing a ton of stuff right now, just to score. Like, these peak scorers are everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, he's chasing the scoring record, so I get why he's stat padding. But he's definitely is stat padding. Like, there's no way around it. Like, it's not a real like 39-9 or whatever it is for him right now. Like you could say with like somebody like Jokic, who it actually is, where he needs to be that good for his team to win, and that's why the Nuggets are the number 1 seed, and the Lakers are like struggling to be in the play-in right now. But yeah, that's the starters. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we are going to go into the reserves. All right. Western Conference reserves. This is where I think it gets a little tricky. And where we
awfully hard. I hated this.
Yeah, this is tough. So my guards, right off the bat, I obviously went Steph Curry because I didn't include him in my starting lineup. And then I also went Ja, just because the Grizzlies are the 2 seed and he's the best player on that team, and he's had an incredible year. Highlight dunks all over the place. How can you not include Ja Morant in the All-Star team? That's about as much analysis as it took me to decide on these 2 guards, and that's about all I did for them. So I'll toss it over to Gwen to start this time, since she got a little bit upset that I went to Tyler last time.
I know, it was very hurtful. I felt skipped over. I think there's 3 guards that are just a lock for these spots. I'll say like one of those no wild card. I think anywhere you can order Steph, John, Dame. I think those are just the 3 easy. Like, to me, like there's like this. Actually, honestly, 3 of the only 4 real like locked positions I felt there were on the Western side for reserves were those 3 guys. Yeah, and any order of them, I guess, would be fine.
Yeah, I'll toss in right away. I have Dame also as one of my wild cards, so just to get that out of the way. Anything?
You guys passed the vibe check.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, it's easy. He's having an incredible year.
Yeah.
Well, it's gone a little under the radar because the Blazers have stunk it up, but yeah, especially the last like month or so, he's been kind of popping off. So, sorry, enough Dame talk. It's bikes with Gwen.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's fine. Go to you. I'm assuming does Dame make your All-Star team, Tyler?
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah. For people who don't know, I'm a big Blazers fan. They're the main team I watch. And yes, Dame is my first guard there. Although I do have Shea right below him. I think they're having very comparable seasons, as we mentioned before. And I guess if we're just talking about the first 2 guards, I'll leave it at that. But aren't there much to add? Dame is averaging 34 and 7 on 64 true shooting percentage. Shea 34 and 5 on 62 true shooting percentage. Shea's a bit more 2-way than Dame, but both their teams are almost identical records. And a lot of the West is at a similar record. So to me, it's like the record argument, which normally is weighed pretty heavily in the All-Star game, is sort of not relevant for a lot of these picks. So to me, I'm just picking what I think have been the best players this season, and I think Dame and Shea are for sure being some of the best players in the West.
Well, yeah, I think Western Conference guards is pretty straightforward, a lot more than a lot of these other positions that we're about to get to, namely the Western Conference front court, Gwen's favorite group.
I hated this. I didn't figure this out until we've been planning this for some time, and I didn't figure this out until I think probably yesterday.
Yeah, so I still am not convinced that I have this completely figured out yet. I went, and I might get some heat for this in terms of the games played thing, but I went Zion and AD as my first 2 front courts, just because I think when they're on the court, they are 2 of the best players in the entire league. Like, AD, when he's at his best, he's one of the top 10 players, and we've seen that this season, even though he's only played, I think as of recording this, 28 games, and Zion's only played 29. And then my other front court, I'm rewarding the Grizzlies again, man. I'm going Jaren Jackson Jr. because I think his defense for the Grizzlies has been outstanding. There's a little bit of speculation as to how many of his blocks, especially at home, are totally legit, but he's still leading the league in blocks by quite a big margin. I think he's 3.2 right now per game, something like that. And his defense has been an anchor for the Grizzlies all year. They are one of the best scoring defenses in the entire league. Pretty much every metric you can point to, they're near the top, if not at the very top. Gwen, I feel like, is giving me a very salty look right now. So I'm going to toss it over to her.
If you're going to email, if anyone here's going to email some angry emails to somebody, you should email Josh's email about this. All you Reddit people out there who are going to complain about Josh's contribution to stat padding. No, I don't really mind. I'm just more upset you didn't have Lauri Markkanen in your forward.
Yeah,
spot. I mean,
definitely. I considered it, and I will say, like, if somebody has Lauri Markkanen, like, you've laid out the argument already, so I'm not going to be upset about it by any means. But again, kind of like Tyler, I'm going to point to a little bit of the team success here as well. Obviously, the Grizzlies have been a better team than the Kings, even though it's been they're 4 games ahead of the Kings right now as we're recording this, but it could go either way. It was 50-50 and it ended up 51 Jaren Jackson, 49 Lauri Markkanen in the end. So yeah, that's where I.
But the Lakers get 2 All-Stars. That's really interesting.
It is very interesting.
How team successful can it be?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Tyler, what do you have?
What did I will say? First, I didn't realize Jaren Jackson Jr. played as many games as he has. He has 34 games played, which is more than Anthony Davis, Zion Williamson, and one other person I'm forgetting, who's been sort of, I think Devin Booker or something, who's
might be
in the consideration, which I think is interesting because in my mind, it feels like he's only played 20 games. But yeah, like you said, his defensive impact cannot be overstated. I'm totally quoting this based on just what I read somewhere, but I believe Memphis's defense before Jaren Jackson Jr.'s return was 23rd, and since he's returned has been first in the league. Not much, and the fact that he's played such few minutes and that has that kind of impact is pretty nuts. And in my opinion, he's actually been the most impactful player on the Grizzlies this year. Not to hate on Ja, who I think is having a bit of an overrated year. Just gonna put that in there. Anyways, my actual forward picks, since that's what we're actually talking about here. My first, I feel a little gross about this too, for a couple of reasons. I picked Anthony Davis. I feel gross because he's only played 28 out of 52 games, and he's a Laker. But since I'm an unbiased media member who should have a all-star ballot, I have to keep it fair. The reason why I put Anthony Davis as my first front court spot, if I had to pick one, if we were doing what we mentioned in the pre-podcast ramble about just having one guard, one forward, is because when he has played, he has been insane. Defensive player of the year caliber player. I have actually watched a couple Lakers games because the Blazers played him 4 times, and he's just like, you just cannot score on him. It's just insane. And the way he covers the floor. He was playing like a top 5 player, honestly. I know we say that about like 7 or 8 players at any time, but he was playing incredible. And, you know, in my opinion, if he played even like 10 more games, I would easily have him as a starter. That's not the case though. So reserves he goes, but I think he has been great this year when he has played. My other spot, my second forward spot is Lauri Markkanen. Like Gwen mentioned, he has been his improvement this year has been. This is like the fun part of like the most improved kind of players to me. A guy like I'll give an example, Blazers example, CJ McCollum. The main thing that happened is he got more minutes and he got more opportunity. But a guy like Lauri Markkanen was seeing the minutes in Chicago and to a lesser extent Cleveland, and for him to just suddenly just become so good, and like there's some shades of it watching FIBA this summer. Lauri Markkanen was carrying Finland. It was crazy to just see him make that jump. And, you know, there's not really much basis to this, but I love rewarding that with an all-star selection. He's been playing like an all-star. He's averaging 25 and I think 10 or so on very, very good percentages. You know, he's borderline 50, 40, 90 kind of guy. If he's not already there right now, I actually can't say. But yeah, been a stud, been awesome. I think he's definitely an all-star. My final forward pick. This is the one I actually feel more gross about because, in my opinion, the other two forwards have been a step above a bit. But my third was Zion. I really don't want to give it to him, but I just felt he's averaging 26 points on 65 shooting percentage. Like, I
Tough
don't
not to
know.
give it to him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's deserving of a starter spot for sure because he's only played 29 games, but I don't know. It's to me, it's how much you value the missed games because to me he's clearly been, the third bet or he's deserving of an all-star forward spot
For sure.
in terms of just the games he's played. But when he's not playing, then that becomes more a question. So
All right. And now the much anticipated list of forwards or front court, whatever we're calling it nowadays.
They're front. Actually, I think all of mine are actually forwards. I'm pretty sure.
Okay. Well, fair enough.
Yeah, it works out fine. You can solve the problem that we're talking about by being icky about Zion by not picking him. It works out really well, and actually, then you don't feel icky about it. You can avoid the entire thing.
I like feeling icky, kind of. It's good to be uncomfortable.
I felt icky in my own way because I was like, okay, cool. I always just cut off at 1,000 minutes, and I did that, and I was like, oh god, there's not a lot of options here. After you get rid of people who haven't played enough, it gets really difficult. Jaren Jackson Jr. is a great candidate. The fouling bothers me. The fact that it's also very weird that the fact that he's played 34 games and only has played 900 minutes, primarily because of foul trouble.
Yeah.
It's such a weird part of the game, and it's so hard to gauge it for me because like he's obviously the best defensive player. He's probably one of the two best defensive players in the league right now, to be honest. And it's like, but he plays so little because he fouls everybody, which is a complicated part of this. And Zion and Davis was the hardest cut for me off this. I didn't have him on my team, and it was minutes. And he played well enough. I really thought about just kind of being like, what the hell. Then I thought, I'm a person of morals. I've done this for years the same way. I have to keep doing it this way. And so yeah, I got Lauri Markkanen. That's the guy. That's who I had in. We already talked about it. And he's progress where he is 2.2 percentage points off from a 50-40-90. His free throws are a little bit low, which is a bummer. And he shoots 7 threes a game, which is a lot. Good for him. The next two are hard. So these two players are statistically very, very similar. They play different roles on offense, and I understand that no one's going to want to have either in the All-Star game. I understand that. I think they're deserving on the body of their work. First of all, Paul George. Paul George has played. He hasn't played as many games as he's played more than you think he has. I think it's actually almost like the opposite of Jaren Jackson Jr. or very similar to Jaren Jackson Jr. Paul George has played 300 minutes more than any of the other guys we've talked about for this spot. Because he plays. I mean, he plays good minutes when he plays. He's shooting 38 from 3, 50% from 54% from 2. He's played really good defense, and he's really helped stabilize the offense kind of when Kawhi's not there. And I say stabilize because that offense has been bad when Kawhi's been gone, but Paul George has helped kind of make that more workable. His kind of counting stats that have been a bit slipping in recent years, kind of the Clippers mesh with Kawhi's been a bit odd, have kind of rebounded a bit. And from an efficiency standpoint, he's having one of his better years recently. Stuff like his PER and BPM have risen a lot recently, and he's been available. And he's had the Clippers are, I don't know where they are right now because it changes every day. At the moment, they are 4th in the West, which whatever, that's partially Kawhi, partially him, but I can't get Kawhi a spot. And also Kawhi doesn't deserve it. Paul George has been the more consistent player. And the other guy who I will scoff at, which is fine. I think Aaron Gordon should be considered for the spot here. And statistically, he has almost all the same stats as Paul George, but save for assists. Assists, he is behind by. He only has 3 assists a game. But also has turnovers, so you do you. Aaron Gordon has been in many ways the perfect big guy to pair with Nikola Jokic, and he benefits a lot from it. But compared to somebody like I really consider Jeremy Grant for this position too, because a very similar thing where Jeremy Grant is a perfect player to play with Dame. You can see that kind of synergy on the court, right? Very similar, and I actually wouldn't mind Grant being here either. Aaron Gordon allows Jokic to do kind of his best, wizardry with the ball by doing all the right things with screens, backdoor cuts, boxing out for rebounds, resetting the offense. he can handle things pretty well by himself when Jokic is sitting, and then bench lineups with Gordon without Jokic have also been pretty stable, especially on defense. He can guard the best defenders. He's shooting that well enough from three at 39% for the year, which is fine. He doesn't shoot a lot, but he shoots well. And I think this is a good spot for him here. Not so anything about the traditional all-star, but I think he's deserving, especially once I cut out everyone else for minute reasons.
I'm very glad you brought up Aaron Gordon because he's my final wild card spot. Because
yes.
yeah,
Cool.
I just think he opens up so much for that Denver offense. Like last year, it was Jokic or they weren't going to get anything. And part of that now is they're a lot healthier than they were at this point in the season last year. But Eric, like you said, Aaron Gordon just does so many things, even when he doesn't have the ball, that obviously it's not going to be the popular pick a lot among like the fan vote or whatever. But he's just done so much for Denver, and I think he's taken a big step forward. And frankly, Denver being the number 1 seed, I feel like they deserve 2 All-Stars. So that's why I put him as my final wild card alongside Dame. But what do you guys have for the final 2 wild card spots? Tyler.
Yeah, so I gotta say, I did not give Paul George the consideration I think he deserved, truthfully. Because I assumed he played like no games, but he plays 38 games, which same number as Dame and some other guys on here, and definitely complicates things a bit for me. If I were to, I don't think my wildcard spots would change personally. I think I would just swap out Zion for Paul George personally. So I take back my Zion pick. I don't have to feel icky anymore.
All right.
Clippers really should have an all-star. And I think before I say my wild cards, I do think Aaron Gordon's a very fair pick here. I think the 1 seed, especially a 1 seed that's separated themselves from such a tightly contested West so much, they probably should have 2 all-stars. It's just, I don't know. I feel like there's just too many. I think if I had to pick an injured reserve, Aaron Gordon would be my first pick probably. Kind of similar to like how Drew Holiday was like, or Chris. Wait, was Drew Holiday an all-star last year?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, well, I'm just capping then. For some reason, I thought he was the first injured reserve, but it's one of those things where it's like he should be an all-star, but it's just a tough year. So I don't have Aaron Gordon. I made all that talk just to not say my picks. My first wildcard spot, I put Ja Morant. This is a pick I feel icky about as well because I don't think Ja's been that great this year, honestly. I think he's been not very efficient. He still can't really shoot all that well. Obviously, he's an amazing slasher and a great playmaker. But I mean, he's shooting 55 true shooting percentage, which is league average. And for a guy who's touted as this like superstar, like I'm not super impressed with that. You know, when you have these other guards who are clear and above, like having much more efficient offensive seasons. And it's not like he's like a ball stopper on defense. So I say all this and I still pick him because Memphis, like Denver, has really started to separate themselves from the rest of the West, and it really would be dumb for them not to have an all-star. Honestly, if Jaren Jackson Jr. had more games played, I'd probably pick him over Ja Morant, but he has not played enough games for me, or I should say minutes, because he's actually played more games than I thought. But I don't know. I just have a tough time with this pick. My other pick is De'Aaron Fox.
Yes. Clutch God of the year.
I mean, truthfully, I think clutch factor is honestly such an underrated, thing. Well, I shouldn't say underrated because people, they go crazy for clutch plays and they always make a big deal about them. But De'Aaron Fox has been one of the clutchest players, if not the clutchest player in the NBA this year. An early front runner for that new clutch award. I haven't checked in a while, but last I checked, he was leading the league in points in the clutch on like pretty impressive percentages. Kings, one of the feel good stories of this year. And I don't know. I mean, compared to the other guys, it's not that he's not playing like an all-star, but I feel like compared to the other guys I put ahead of him, I put him ahead of, I just feel like he's more deserving of the spot. And Kings are not quite separated themselves from that chase pack, but they are sort of in the driver's seat right now in the 3rd seed. And yeah, I think De'Aaron Fox should be I believe, first-time All-Star this year.
Yeah, I have De'Aaron Fox too for the same reason. And you've already kind of covered all the same reasons I pick him. I do want to toss in with the whole Jaw thing. I feel I part of why I had Jaw higher is that I feel like Jaw, you get like offensive plus minus, right? When Jaw's on versus when he's off. And there's a really marked difference that's not really accounted for by Jaw's statistical performance. And I think what we're seeing is like kind of like a version of what Steph used to do to offenses, still does to offenses, but back in the day when people didn't really know as much what to do with it, which was he has a superhuman ability. He has like incredible athleticism and he has his burst, and he still is one of the most efficient at the rim shooters in the league this year. And when he plays and he gets driving, you can see that the defense has to warp so much around him. And his assists, I don't know, they're 8. They're just about what you expect from a high volume guy like that. But I think that more than that, I don't have access to like hockey assists, but I'm sure that like he's high up there. When you watch it, you can see how his presence really changes things. In a way that a superstar would. But even though I agree, when I was looking through the numbers trying to get ready for this, like his statistical profile is pretty lacking compared to every other guard on the that we put on the rosters. Um, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's I'm definitely with you. He has that reverse gravity that Steph has, where it's similar to Giannis, where he people have to pack the paint for him, and then it opens up around the three. Whereas with Steph, it opens up the paint because they have to swarm on the perimeter. So I definitely agree with you there. And one other thing I forgot to mention is that the All-Star game, it's entertainment at the end of the day, and Ja is for sure top 5 most entertaining player in the league to watch right now. So I don't have any real qualms, like major qualms with him being an all-star. I wish he was, certain guys I'd probably prefer to give it to that I just have a hard time doing it.
And it's fair. I mean, Paul George is going to be, I think he's a pretty boring all-star player, in my opinion.
Yeah. Being based in Minnesota, I have one other guy that I'd be remiss if I didn't toss out there right now. What would you guys say if Anthony Edwards ended up on one of these rosters?
Um, I have in my honor mention section, which I made, um, my second one, it says Anthony Edwards in parentheses should be in over Ja, TBH.
Okay.
Um, I think he's having it's just one of those, you've seen so many great guards in the West, especially. Um, just the reality is it's a really tough spot to make an all-star game in. And Anthony Edwards, the Timberwolves they're much improved as of late. I think there's something like 11-3 over the last 14 with some pretty impressive wins, including wins over like Denver. And he's having statistically a good year, and he's obviously elevating that offense, which they have needed lately. But I don't know. He'll get his due for sure very soon, but I just don't think he quite has gone there this year.
Yeah, and I think that Anthony Edwards, there's somebody else we're going to mention in the next part of the league, next half of the league, who I think has a case that's based on this too. He's played more than anybody.
Right.
I think he has more minutes, but he has more minutes than anybody else. He's played every game. His numbers are pretty good. I think that what Anthony Edwards, and I've watched a couple of Minnesota games because I don't know, I do like Rudy Gobert. I like his play style. He hasn't had a good year. He's had a terrible year. It's been a terrible trade. But I like him as a player, not as a person. And I feel like Anthony Edwards, when you watch those games and the advanced numbers, I think backs up a little bit. It can feel a bit empty calories-y because that offense is so disjointed. And
Right.
I don't think it's his fault. I don't think it's fair. I don't on a certain level. I think he's been caught up in like statistical noise that comes from the rest of the team really not being very cohesive. And I think you can see him kind of check out at times, and he gets a little bit hero ball at times. And I understand. I mean, if I were him, it's no one else in that team's really going for it. But I think that I mean, and I don't want to. Sorry, I know I don't want to get mad at Minnesota fans. It's like Cat's had a bit of a down year. D'Angelo Russell is fine, but he's what he is. Gobert clogs a lot of stuff out there, and Edwards is going to be a superstar player, and will be better. I think this they need to figure out their roster a little bit more. And I think that's benefit. I think from an efficiency standpoint, I think he just is a bit behind someone like Ja. And team success. I mean, you just watch it. Ja is able to make his offense something special. Anthony Edwards just isn't right now, and that's maybe more roster construction than it is where he is as a player.
Yeah. I first off, nobody here is going to upset Minnesota sports fans more than I will, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
But I do agree that I think Anthony Edwards has it in him to be considered like somewhere on that jaw tier where he's just an incredible athlete and he's a great slasher and he can do the wild dunks and just be a crazy athlete on the floor. But I agree that a lot of this comes down to just Minnesota's not a good team. They're not constructed very well. Like, I think we all were on the same page when they traded for Gobert that that was going to be a very awkward situation between him and Karl Anthony Towns. So not to spend too much time on Anthony Edwards in an all-star conversation where he's not even really included, but I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on where he should land on this list, I guess. But
It's worth talking about. I also want to toss him too. I just feel like given how he plays, he should have an assist total higher than 4.5 a game.
yes,
And
absolutely.
just with that team and his skill set and his passing ability, that's really low. And it's a signal of like just this offensive muck.
Yeah, I think part of that also has to do with D'Angelo Russell and just he has like 5 plays a game where it's just like, what are you doing, dude? He's either just dribbling the air out of the ball or he's just standing in a corner not doing anything. So well, we've talked about it enough, I think. But yeah, Minnesota roster construction is terrible, and yeah, that's all that is. That's all there is to it, I think. But yeah, I think that about does it for the Western Conference. And I think we're going to take one more break and then we'll bring you the East. All right. Western Conference is in the books. Now we're heading East. To get things started, my starting guards, I went ahead and I put 2 smaller market guys in here. And I might get some heat for this, but I'm going Tyrese Halliburton out of Indiana because without Tyrese Halliburton in the lineup, like right now, I think they're 11th in the East. So
1-9. They're 1-9 their last 10 games. They have spiraled without
exactly. Yeah. Without Halliburton there, this team has been horrible. And like going into the year, I don't think anybody expected this team to be anything close to a playoff team. And with Halliburton leading the way, obviously they didn't make as many tear down moves as we might have expected them to either. But Halliburton has been incredible. 20-10, leading the league in assists. And I think his value is proven in the 10 games that he hasn't played in their 1-9 stretch. And then my other guard is Donovan Mitchell because Cleveland has been another one of those surprise teams, kind of like the Kings in the West, where not a ton of people, I did, but not a ton of people, not a ton of people expected them to be very good this year, but they've consistently been among at least the mid-tier in the Eastern Conference playoffs, like hanging around the 3 to 5 seed at any given time during the season. So that's how I landed on those 2 guys. I'll toss it over to Gwen next. Who are your 2 guards?
Mine are the same. Same thing. I think same thing with Halliburton. I would also say with Mitchell, it's really interesting that we're having such a weird statistical outlier year. Mitchell had that 71-point game. It was incredible. He has been an incredible, great fit guard on like a superstar on this young team. He's not gonna make anybody's MVP roster.
No.
He's gonna have a 71-point game, and that makes sense. Like not even an outlier from the game. That game makes sense given what he is right now. He won't sniff a roster. It's just a very weird year for players like that. But yeah, I had him in Halliburton.
Cool. Before we go over to Tyler, I will say that the official starting lineup is Giannis as the captain, KD and Embiid as the other forwards or front court, sorry, and then Kyrie and Donovan Mitchell as
it was Tatum over Embiid.
Oh, Tatum, sorry.
Tatum over Embiid, yeah.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah,
Tatum. Philly fans had a flash of hope for a second, and
that's right. It again. Sorry, Philly fans out there. Tyler, who are your 2 guards?
So I also picked Donovan Mitchell as my first guard. Okay. I don't think when I was looking at the actual All-Star breakdown, I'm pretty sure players, media, and fans all ranked him as a starter. So not going to really delve into that. We already talked about him. My other guard, another icky pick for me. I keep making these icky picks because I just feel like, I don't know. I did pick Kyrie Irving. I don't know. I don't mind the Halliburton pick for sure. But I don't know. I mean, honestly, like Kyrie has been having another really good season. Another small guard with really great efficiency. Brooklyn has been pretty good this year. Obviously, they've really tanked with the loss of Durant, but I don't know. I was very close to giving the spot to someone else, who I will not say right now, but it was not Halliburton, although I love Halliburton. But yeah, I put Kyrie there because I don't know. He is having a good year. And he's playing games, if you can believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a case for Kyrie for this spot. I mean, obviously he already made the starting lineup in actuality. So I mean, he's been great for them, especially when him and KD were in the lineup together. They were able to feed off each other very well on that offense. And like you said, the fact that he's actually playing games this year and he's showing again that he can be a really good player. The person, maybe not like him so much, but as a pure basketball player, I think we can appreciate that he's been pretty good this year.
I, I think I just want to say, like, I think my take on this, I agree, he's had a great year from a basketball standpoint. I think kind of similar to my thing with like the availability, right? From availability argument with like Davis and Zion, if you're not healthy, there's a limit to how like much value you can provide. And I think that obviously while he's played almost as many games as Halliburton. He's gonna pass Halliburton in games played before the All-Star break, I'm pretty sure. Um, I don't think I can consider somebody like a top four person in their position if their team asked them to go away.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just can't do that. And you know what I mean? Like I can't.
Was that this
like,
season?
Yes, that was the season.
Oh man,
it's been a long season.
About that.
It's been a long season. I just don't feel
oh
like.
my god! And I'm Jewish. I'm taking it off.
Listen, if one of us is gonna
Shiza.
have him on the team, it'd be you, not the two of us. But but like I just don't feel like from that standpoint. I think that like that team from a talent perspective, I can argue from a basketball perspective, I'm gonna argue that the tumultuousness that he provides to a team. And if you look at it, like when the media was at its peak, when there was this peak fervor around him, even before he got suspended, there was still a pretty clear basketball slippage. And earlier in the year, there was like a lot of friction with him and like Simmons. And I think that it's an example of some of those off court and then behavioral things coming into the basketball element of it. And I don't have them into that reason. That's just my take. It's an availability question. If you're being asked to go away, I just don't feel like I can make you an all-star.
Yeah. Again, I don't have him in there for pretty similar reasons, honestly. Like, yeah, I just think Halliburton's been better and he's done a lot more for Indy, in my opinion. But Agreed. This is where I think things are going to get a little interesting. I think there's a consensus that there are probably 4 front court guys here that deserve a spot. Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, and Durant.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, there's only 3 spots to put them in. So the way that I went about this, I have Giannis, Embiid, and Tatum as my 3 in the starting lineup.
You would.
So here's the thing. I think on any given night, Giannis is still the most dominant player in the NBA. He hasn't had like as efficient a season as he's usually had, which I understand. If you're going to leave him out of the lineup for that reason, then that's totally fine. I get it. I'm a Bucks fan. I'm going to put him in there. So, and then Embiid, the game he had against Jokic and the Nuggets the other night was just incredible. 47 points. And after that, I think he's my MVP frontrunner. So I can't leave him out of the starting lineup. Like it wouldn't make sense for me to not start him in the All-Star game while also having him as my MVP frontrunner. And then Jason Tatum is the best player on the best team in the NBA right now. Like he's had an incredible year. The Celtics have been great. I don't like talking about the Celtics in a positive light all that much, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But yeah, I have Kevin Durant as my first forward off the bench, in part for all those reasons, and then kind of the games played, and he's been hurt, so I can't really knock him that much for that because when he's been on the court, he's been great. But that's why I have those other 3 guys ahead of him. I'll toss it over to Gwen now.
Yeah, I think okay. So I think there's different arguments to be made. I think Tatum, in my opinion, is my safest, my most comfortable of the 4 to just have on the team.
Agreed.
He's played by far the most minutes. He's played the most games. His statistical profile is incredible. He continues to grow and develop. His overall shooting percentage is lower than we expect it to be. That's mostly because he's been shooting threes at a much higher rate, which he said he's been hitting more recently, but on the season he's only at 35%, which is he takes hard shots. It's whatever. I don't really feel like Tatum is that much of a just disputed point, which he passed for, but whatever. I think that from Durant, so for Durant, Embiid, and Giannis, I think that first of all, Durant has played more minutes this year than Giannis has.
Yeah.
Even with the injury, which I think factors into this a little bit. And I think that to me, Kevin Durant's offensive efficiency and the sheer like volume, the massive amount of volume, usage, scoring, he has like his game variance is so low. It's such a consistent scoring. And I think he's been, if you need a bucket in the NBA this year, I feel like he's the guy.
Yeah.
And I put him on for that reason. To me, the biggest difference is Embiid and Giannis. That's my big, because they have a very similar game style. It's just like very physical, not literally, but like in the sense of like what they contribute and where they play their best. Embiid has played fewer games and minutes than Giannis. But to me, like you already mentioned, the efficiency of it. This is really a down year for Giannis, and I get why. I understand it. Middleton, we've seen Middleton's been back, and they've been better since he's been healthier. But it's a tough cut, and I think that you mentioned it. The efficiency is where I would just put it to Embiid. So I feel like Embiid has a very similar like statistical profile, but with more efficiency. And I feel like if I'm going to do that, if I look at that, I have to give it to Embiid and then team success, I guess. And you know what I mean? Like I feel like I don't think there's a bad. The one person I feel very strongly about in this group is Tatum.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like Tatum is the lock, and then it's basically what do you like better about the other three guys, and it's going to come down to one of them just not going to make it, even though they deserve it. And then in the Western Conference, they probably would have made it. So like,
absolutely, yeah,
exactly. So Tyler, what do you at for this?
I find this interesting because, well, here's what I'll say first.
Okay.
To me, Embiid was the easy pick for me. I also think if he's not the MVP front runner, he's easily top 2 candidate once again. Sixers have been doing great lately. As a matter of fact, they are currently the 3 seed at 33-17. You know, in the West, that'd be 2nd or 3rd seed as well. Kevin Durant, I think when he has played has been, I mean, he was borderline MVP front runner when he was playing. I have a hard time not putting him in the starting lineup with how good he has been when he's on the court. And obviously he's missed more time than these other guys, but still played 38 games. And like Gwen said, has played a lot of minutes in those games. To me, it was Giannis and Tatum was where the last front court spot came down to. And the reason why Giannis was in my last spot is because he had his slow start, as we mentioned. And the reason I have Tatum there is because to me, I don't know. I feel like Kevin Durant and Embiid have been more important to their teams almost than Tatum. Not to say Tatum isn't super important to his team and that he hasn't had a stellar season. And so to me, that was my last spot was deciding between those two. So I look at Tatum's stats and I'm like, wow, this guy has been turning up, you know, averaging 31, 8 and 4, very efficient, you know, obviously two-way player, amazing. And I was like, dang, that's gonna be hard for Giannis to compete with. And I go to Giannis's page, and he's lo and behold, I spelled his name wrong. Lo and behold, averaging 31, 12, and 5, with admittedly for his standards, less efficient. Still can't shoot the 3 ball, still struggles with free throws, but he is still an absolute force, still dominant, like you said. I feel like his effect on offense, not necessarily his raw stats, is still greater than Tatum's. And as good as Tatum is as a defender, to me, Giannis is still an all defense caliber player, especially, you know, as a rim protector, which to me is more important defensively. So to me, I had Giannis as my 3rd starter, and I did not have Tatum in my 3 starters. And that was my reasoning.
Yeah, Boston fans are gonna be coming after you now.
I don't care. I should, you know, I'll explain later why Boston fans shouldn't hate me. I don't care actually, but yeah.
Grant Williams All-Star. No, I think I agree. I think that's a fair way. It's a great way to look at it. I think you're a little bit underselling the value of Tatum's perimeter defense. I think it's actually I think Tatum's most significant improvement is in between passes. He's been much better, a much more quick in between passer, which has been great for them. And I think his defense has improved considerably. So I mean, they've actually you watch more Celtics games, they have him on some of the assignments that they used to always have Smart on. And like he played the Warriors and he was on Curry for a while and didn't look he looked. Let me be clear. Tatum looked terrified that entire game because Tatum often looks kind of terrified when he plays the Warriors, but he could handle and hang, and that's just my yeah. Again, no bad choices here. I don't begrudge you having Tatum off it, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
I just was I was surprised you guys were like Tatum's the de facto guy when I was like I actually really struggled with whether or not I should pick Tatum.
yeah. I mean, for me, it really came down to just Boston's been that good all season long, and I feel like if we're gonna take record into account, like team success, I think for me at least, Tatum had to be on there just for that reason alone. Kind of a similar thing to Jokic, where he's been that good for Boston when he's played, and you can also make the argument that Jaylen Brown has probably been the best second option for that team than any of the other guys on this list too. But like that, like we've talked about, there's no bad options here because
no.
there's four great guys.
Mhm.
But yeah, going over to the reserves, we've already talked about Kyrie. I have him as one of my backups. I like we talked about, been a great year, and then I also have Jaylen Brown. Not just brought him up too, but he's been obviously like a little bit more of a higher assist total from him, but that's just not the kind of guy that he's been throughout his entire career. I think he's been a great scorer. His defense has been very, very good for Boston as well. And between him and Tatum, like they're probably the best 1-2 punch in the league, at least in terms of how so far the season, taking into account health of other players and everything like that. But yeah, that's what I've got for the guards. Tyler, are you the same or are you that different?
I mean, well, obviously I'm slightly different because I
Oh,
had
right,
Kyrie
because
in
you
my
have Kyrie.
starters.
Yeah.
I did have Jaylen Brown as my first guard. And the reason why I said Boston fans should hate me is because I was like this close to starting Jaylen Brown. He's been really good this year. You know, he's a guy who like you think of as second option, great defender, but he's also averaging 27 points a game.
Yeah.
Behind a guy who's averaging 30 or 31, which is like amazing 1-2 punch. Like also like the kind of guy that you can slot next to anyone. Kind of like we were saying earlier, an Aaron Gordon or Jeremy Grant type. Um, to me, that was a no-brainer pick. My second guard pick, and I'm going to preface this by saying my wild card has a guard that could easily slot here either. To me, they're both reserves, so it doesn't really matter. But who I've written down right here is James Harden, because he has been having a quietly amazing season. Obviously, his totals aren't as high as Mr. Tyrese Halliburton, but per game, he's averaging 23 and 11. Um, Not the Harden of Houston years, but as a playmaker, he is still as good as ever. And again, like being exactly what that team needs, a secondary ball handler, or I guess he's the primary ball handler who can distribute, make his guys better. Embiid, I think, has benefited a ton from it. And, is having obviously Embiid is great without him, but with him, it's also makes things a lot easier for him. And maybe long term, it'll help with his stamina and wear and tear for the playoffs. So we'll see with that. But I think Harden's been having a great year. And yeah, I think he's an all star.
Yeah, I'll toss in. I have Harden as one of my wild cards too. Pretty much all the same reasons you said. Like he's basically a nothing on defense, but his offense, his playmaking is just off the charts. It's always super efficient. He's one of the best playmakers in the entire league. Gwen, what do you got?
Yeah. So I had Jaylen Brown
Yeah,
as my guard. I mean, I think pretty easy thing. Although I will say, Jaylen Brown is one of those interesting players where kind of similar to the Laurie Markkinen versus LeBron James thing. Uh, Jaylen Brown's advanced analytical numbers and some of his like more efficiency based numbers are lower than you'd think, primarily because he's not a playmaker still.
yeah,
Like he's still not the playmaker that you want him to be, and so you still have this like he has like his assist turnover ratio is pretty much one, which isn't great for somebody with his volume with his usage. Anyway, I thought he was a bit further down from the top two than otherwise. And I had and my guard ordering is very frustrating. I'll get to this later. I had a hard time with guards here. I had DeMar DeRozan as my second guard, and the team is bad. And since I made this decision, they've lost like the last couple. I don't know if they won yesterday. But they lost a couple games in a row, and I felt very silly. They won a game yesterday. Um, the offense has been really bad on that team. And I've watched a lot of Bulls games because I really wanted. I actually kind of wanted to see if Vooch would get better. I wanted to see Vooch play and see how he actually did in the offense when there was less ball handling and he had to do more by himself. The answer is not great. Vooch hasn't had a good year. And Chicago ball is terrible to watch. But DeMar is one of the people who he creates something out of nothing to a really high level. And compared to a lot of other prior DeMar seasons, he actually has an efficient year. Like his PER is the same as James Harden's, which is weird.
Weird. Yeah.
He's played a ton. His win shares for 48 is really high. BPM, VORP, all that kind of stuff. Much, much higher, actually, all this stuff than Jaylen Brown. And it comes from this like ruthless efficiency. He's not shooting threes anymore, but he still has this incredible effective and true shooting percentage. This comes from he's a really, really efficient mid-range scorer. And that's not a great shot necessarily, but it's a good shot for him, statistically, given how much he makes it. And ideally, I think he'd make it less if the team were better. DeMar DeRozan, I think, is one of those players who I think is having a bit of an underrated year just because of how terrible the team is. And to me, I think he makes a deserving all-star. Yeah, you can watch him play, and he gets in modes where you almost forget how bad the Bulls are for a second, and they're down by 10.
Right. Like, yeah, DeMar is just, he's always been such a weird player to watch just because his play style is so different than like the typical modern NBA where he just doesn't shoot threes at all, no matter how much you want him to. And like you said, the Bulls are just so bad, but he has been like the one good thing about that team all season long. Like they've had terrible injury luck, and they've had a few games where like they could have won and it's just not gone their way. But yeah, I think DeMar is a totally reasonable pick. For the front court, I obviously had Kevin Durant as my top choice. Then my other two spots, it was tougher. But I ended up going Pascal Siakam out of Toronto.
Yes.
25, 8, and 6. Like, obviously, Toronto probably isn't as good this year as a lot of people probably expected, just because it's a Nick Nurse Toronto Raptors team. You expect them to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference all the time, and they just haven't been this year. But Siakam's been great. And the other one that I went with was Bam Adebayo. Again, oh, you don't like this one?
No, we had the same ones. I thought I'd be special.
My God.
I was going to say Bam's a lock, and I was going to feel really cool about it. And you've stolen that from me.
Yeah, about to ruin your night, then, Gwen.
Oh God.
No, I mean, Miami's another one. Like, kind of like Toronto. Like, a lot of people probably expected them to be a lot better than they are this year, and they've come on as of late. But Bam, throughout the entire year, his defense is always going to be great. He's an awesome rim protector. His rebounding is awesome, but he's had a pretty great offensive season as well. Right now, he's averaging 21 points, 10 rebounds, and then he's shooting 54% from the field, basically an 80% free throw shooter too. So his efficiency has been very good in terms of offense, like one of the best seasons he's ever had in terms of his career. So I had to put him in there. Sorry to steal your thunder there. If you have anything else to add on Bam Adebayo, then go for it, Gwen.
I think that Kyle Lowry's taken a major step back, and I think that because of that, and Tyler Hero's been. He hasn't been as bad, I think, as people I've heard him described, but he's not really there either. And because of that, I think that Bam has to pick up more of that offensive and defensive load. I think he's done so. I think on defense, he still remains one of the most. I mean, like that he is to me like an eighth of a tier below the Jaren Jackson Juniors and Giannis of the world defensively. And as a coordinator of defenses, he's been great, and he erases a lot of problems that Tyler Hero and Robinson, when he plays, actually give up. And all the other island of misfit toys that Spoelstra puts out and turns into efficient players every year, because that's what he does. I care more about putting Pascal here. The Raptors have it every year. Pascal has been incredibly efficient. It's whatever. He always has these numbers. They're improved moderately. He's one of the great success stories of the NBA the last 10 years, 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
His development's been incredible. To me, his ability to play, make, and dribble and be a point of attack guy has been the biggest jump that I've seen. And as somebody, my partner is a big Raptors fan. We watch lots of Toronto basketball, and the previous couple of years have been spent, a lot of it has been spent watching Pascal Siakam dribble off his foot in key moments or throw the ball out of bounds on a terrible pass. And just as a lead ball handler, just a bit taxing. And Van Fleet has a bit of a slower year shooting wise. Scotty Barnes hasn't taken the step we want to, and so Pascal has had to take on more of a that kind of role. And he has an over 2 assist turnover ratio. He's averaging 6.5 assists a game. He turns the ball over. I think it's one of his lowest turnover years he's had in a while. And given how high his usage is, it's really incredible. I think just his ability to be this kind of like on ball guy, and his ability, he's a decent defender too. I think it helps me. A good case for him to be here.
Yeah, I mean his turnovers are basically the same as they were last year, but he's also averaging an additional assist per game. He averaged 5.3 assists last year. He's averaging 6.3 assists this year. So like the playmaking is it's been incredible for Toronto. Like they haven't had a good year, but he's been the reason that they're at least hanging around in the Eastern Conference. Tyler, what do you have for this? Exact same.
Yeah. So I I was gonna ask actually before I get into it, just totally random question. Do you guys think Pascal is in Toronto after the trade deadline?
Ooh.
Oh, Pascal? I think he is.
Yeah.
That contract's gross. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see how you move that.
I also don't know if you can. I feel like I think the Raptors are in it. This is a slight offshoot. I think it's interesting and relevant, kind of what we were just talking about. The Raptors, I think, are in a really not bad. It's just like a weird situation where I feel like everyone on that team who's up for an extension or could be traded has a reasonable argument to be made that this is a bad year for them and that they should receive more than this. And it just lowers their value. Like OG Anunoby has had a bit of a weird year. He's still a great defender, and he should probably have more on ball duties. Scotty Barnes is the same thing. They have to orient around Scotty Barnes' timeline here, but also Pascal Siakam is this incredible homegrown player on a 4-year, $140 million.
Right. That throws a wrench into the whole thing.
Yeah, who's already having some injury issues. He's already having a bit of injury problems. And also, who takes that? Who can match that salary for one who can match that average of $34 million a year salary? And they have to get value back too. They have to get value if they're going to pay someone like that.
Yeah, it puts them in a weird spot, kind of like it'd have to be something like what happened with Utah and Minnesota, where Toronto's basically just getting pennies on the dollar for like 3 weird role players and then a bunch of draft picks. But even then,
like Anthony Simons and Nurkic and like Josh.
Yeah. There you go.
I don't know. I'm just it's just an idea,
But like, yeah,
I don't understand. I don't know why. That's not a guy that I'd be. Pascal's. If there's anybody that I wouldn't want to move off of Toronto right now, it's probably Pascal, just because of the year he's had. But again, the injuries, it makes it tough. So you never know when that's going to go off the rails either.
And that contract is so icky in a way that's like it's one of those where it's like you can see a very clear world where that goes bad. I feel like the Raptors are really set for kind of like what they did with Norman Powell. They flip him to get a pick and a guy. Yeah. And that guy's Gary Trent Jr. Gary Trent Jr.'s had an okay couple of years. He's been fine for us. I'm not a Raptors fan. This is a Raptors house, but I'm not a Raptors fan. I'm a Spurs fan. I have no stake in any of these conversations. But like you flip Trent maybe like a protected first round pick and somebody for salary cap, and then you kind of see what we have next year. Because you got to figure out. I mean, there's some interesting contract questions for next year. You got to figure out what you're going to do with your core is locked in, but a lot of the rest of the roster is going to be up for an extension or up to guarantee their contract. They're going to be extension help. So it's going to have to happen. And I just don't know what this team's going to do. OG Anunoby doesn't want to stay on this contract. There's just a whole bunch of questions here that I don't know what this team's going to do with it. I don't think trading Pascal is really an option.
Yeah, the more we talk about this, I think Minnesota Vikings fans are going to relate to this. I don't want to talk about football right now.
No, but I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very similar situation. But Now moving into the wild cards. This is.
Whoa! I never mentioned my starting.
Oh,
My
I'm sorry,
forwards.
Tyler. Go,
No,
go,
shut up,
go.
Tyler.
I
We don't wanna hear
I'm
everything.
sorry, Tyler.
I asked
Go.
one question about Pascal, and we all go
Yeah,
haywire.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'll be a little quicker because I just wasted a bunch of time with that.
No, go for it.
Obviously, I have Jason Tatum as my first forward. It'd be a crime if he wasn't an all-star. My second forward, Bam Adebayo, as mentioned. The only thing I wanted to add about the Bam conversation is that people say a lot about, oh, these guys can guard 1 through 5. In reality, it's more like 1 through 4 or 2 through 5. To me, Bam is one of the true 1 through 5 guys and the very rare 1 through 5 guys. I can't, there might not even be another guy in the league who's true 1 through 5. Maybe on a good day like Draymond Green.
I'd throw
Um,
Giannis in there,
yeah, maybe
but
Giannis. I'm not sure how great Giannis can guard a truly fast point guard, but Giannis to me is a 2v5 guy. But
yeah,
one of those guys who's elite at something defensively. And then yeah, offensively, Bam was talking before the season. He basically said, I want to be a guy who can score, a lot more than I do right now. I can't remember the number he threw out for points per game, but it was definitely people were like, that seems crazy. And it is a lot more than what he's averaging now. But yeah, I mean 21 and 10 on, this insane defense, and he's been really efficient and like added that mid-range jumper to his arsenal. To me, easy all-star. And Miami, yeah, they have really come on as of late, so I feel less guilty about having an all-star in the team. My last forward um, is Julius Randle, um, because he's honestly odd year Randle is really good. Um, he's been good this year. It seems like the addition of Jalen Brunson has really worked out. He has less ball handling duties, so um, he's less dubious handle this year. Um, and I don't know. Knicks have not been like insane, but I think most people thought they were going to be another sub 500 team, and right now they're hovering a few games above 500 and pretty firmly in the playoff race. So I don't know. To me, it feels like they should have an all-star. Some people have been picking Jalen Brunson in addition to Julius Randle, not just Jalen Brunson, which to me is a little crazy. But I don't know. I feel like Julius Randle has been having a pretty good year, and I don't know. That's
No,
all I got.
I agree. And I think he's one of my wild cards, but I think very similarly. It's especially the last 10 games, really you can really see his like progress as just a masher. And his ability to kind of like the Knicks style of ball is not as pretty as as their teams, but it runs with this like physicality and rebounding and these kind of like close up small passes, box outs, this like a lot of tip balls, that kind of stuff, right? And it's a cultural thing that I think Randall's a big part of, and Brunson allows that to work a lot more fluidly. It just gives him a pocket of space. He gives him a little bit of room to work that he just doesn't have if Brunson's not there. But I also Randall is one of those like Anthony Edwards guys where he's played almost 900 minutes
yeah,
and he's played 52 games. Like he's from like a value for team perspective, he's been there all the time and putting up good numbers and being a culture setter for the team and being defensive. He's been good on defense. He's back to not being a step slow anymore. He's still a little bit slow, but like not a full step, maybe like a quarter step slow.
yeah. I mean, he's still a power forward, obviously, but like I went back and forth a little bit with Randall and Brunson in terms of one of my wild card spots, and I ultimately landed on Randall for a lot of the same reasons. Like I think that at the end of the day, he is the guy that truly makes that team run, makes them go the way that they have this season. And like Tyler said, odd year Randall is apparently a thing. So maybe he takes another step back this next year, but this season's been very good for him. My other wild card was James Harden. We've talked about him already. He's going to be a nothing burger on defense, but he's always going to be a really good playmaker, averaging almost 11. I think he is actually averaging 11 assists a game right now, and he's always going to be a threat to shoot the three ball. So those are my two wild cards. Gwen, what do you got for a wild card?
Yeah, so I have Randall. And these were awful, by the way. I should have had these too because I had a whole list of possible wild card picks. Tons of people I could have put here.
Yeah.
I have Jimmy Butler, and the frustrating part about Jimmy Butler was because I was like, Jimmy Butler. Let me make my arguments. I've watched Heat. I feel like I think Butler should be here. was that as I was making my case for Jimmy Butler, I also felt like Drew Holiday had like the same argument, and it felt very similar to me because like I think that like from an on-ball defensive standpoint, these two are like those like your stereotypical perimeter defenders. They're traditional. They are incredibly difficult to guard. I would never want to have to get past either of those two people in a grocery aisle. I guess is when I'd encounter them if they shop at Aldi's, I guess. Uh, and but like, and they have this offensive load. They have this role as an offensive ball handler. We saw this with Drew when Middleton was gone, and we saw this with Butler with Lowry being diminished, and Hero being Hero. Hero's not facilitating an offense in the same way. Both from minutes perspective, they've both played a middle amount, not like a ton, but not like a little. And I just feel like for me, the tiebreaker essentially was going to be in a moment where I think about ball handling, running an offense, who I really trust to do that. I think that as of now, while Holiday's had a great year doing that, I still kind of do trust Butler more, which isn't like a great argument. It's much more of a subjective argument. But I just feel like that's my approach to how I've watched them play this year, is that I feel like Butler's been a little bit more of a trustworthy and more of a stable presence in that offense and helping it be an offensive focal point. Holiday's is my first cut and what I felt the worst on, and then I actually don't have Harden on my team, and that also feels bad. I don't like that either. I think he's having a good year. I agree with you guys. I think having him off is a bit of an atrocity, but like
you got to make cuts somewhere.
Well, Butler's the only one I really felt like. I feel like Randall kind of really get cut too. I felt like have you ever shared am I the last one to do my wild cards, or am I the last one to do those?
Tyler's got to go yet.
Yeah, you go. I'll do it. I'll explain my argument.
I find it funny that our East rosters are really similar. The main difference is that I have Kyrie and you guys don't. But yeah, let me get to my wild cards. Obviously I have Tyrese Halliburton. To me, I know I mentioned James Harden first, but to me, I see them having both very impressive years. Could go either way. Not that it matters. I'm ranking the reserves, but Tyrese Halliburton, we talked about how great he's been this year, so I won't mention too much about him. My last wild card, Gwen, when you start talking about DeMar DeRozan, I actually felt a little like, ooh, maybe I should have considered him a little more. I still end up leaning towards Pascal Siakam as my last pick, just because to me they've had such similar years. I think defensively, Pascal Siakam has probably been better. I say this as someone who has not really watched either of them that much.
He has been. I've not watched DeMar DeRozan. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And I love DeMar DeRozan. I think it's so funny how he's like a player from the 90s transported to the year 2023 to play basketball for the Chicago Bulls. But I don't know. To me, it's just like Pascal Siakam has been the one bright spot in the poop storm that has been the Raptors this year, and I just had to go with him the wild card. So DeMar DeRozan would probably be my odd man out. Drew Holiday was actually my honorable mentions as well. So I do think Drew Holiday, especially when with how much time Chris has missed and how he has stepped up in that way, especially as a scorer, it's tough to leave him off. But yeah.
Cool. Well, lady, gentlemen, I think that about does it for our NBA All-Star preview. Thank you guys so much for joining me. This has been a lot of fun, and we're going to have to do this again at some point. Maybe as the playoffs get a little bit closer.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I love talking about basketball, and I love not talking about European history. So this is a perfect trade-off for me.
Awesome. Well, this has been Gwen McCaw, Tyler Straub, Josh Fry, Into the Fryer. First episode in the books. Thank you, guys. All right, that is episode 1 of Into the Fryer in the books. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to make this a weekly thing. We're going to come at you every single Monday morning. Next week, won't be here again until after the Super Bowl takes place, so we'll do a Super Bowl recap. And then after that, we're going to do a little bit of an MLB preview as well, prior to the Major League Baseball season firing up with catchers and pitchers reporting for spring training soon. We're going to do 5-word MLB teams for all 30 teams with another special guest that I will reveal then and not now. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. feel free to give us a like, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're using. However you do that, give us one of those. And yeah, we'll talk at you next Monday.